Hello and welcome to the second edition of Energy Solutions for the Future, the ESF broadcast. My name is Caleb Adebayo. So what is the ESF broadcast? The ESF broadcast is a monthly series curated as short interviews of policy experts in the energy space, interrogating various energy challenges in Nigeria and possible solutions to them with an aim to working towards an energy-rich future, one that is sustainable, sufficient, and affordable. The goal is for these conversations to drive more conversations and action, as well as provide practical and workable ideas for positive policy change and implementation in Nigeria. Today, we have with us a distinguished lawyer and energy policy expert, Dr. Ayodele Oni, who I will be discussing with on the topic, Power to the People, what will a fully powered Nigeria look like? Dr. Ayodele Oni is a partner at Bloomfield Law Practice and head of the firm's Energy and Natural Resources Practice Group. He's an active leading voice and thought leader in the development of many transformative policy changes in Nigeria, especially in the Nigerian electric power sector. And he has played the role in developing some of the template documents used in the electric power sector. He was also part of the team that advised the Nigerian government's Bureau of Public Enterprises on post-privatization and provided legal, policy, and regulatory support to the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. He has authored several articles in leading law publications and journals, and is author of the book, The Nigerian Electric Power Sector, Policy, Law, Negotiation, Strategy, Business. Welcome, Dr. Oni. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Caleb. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Okay, so let's talk some energy solutions. I have a number of interesting questions here for you today. So the first is this. The year is 2030. That's 10 years into the future. The quarter is Q4. The country is Nigeria. What are your projections for what the power supply will look like then? And what kind of power systems do you see? Centralized, decentralized, conventional? What's your projection for Nigeria's 10 years into the future electricity sector?
Okay, 10 years from now, I think power supply would have improved substantially. I always say to people, the problem isn't generation. If we can get the distribution bit, if we can get infrastructure relating to distribution and transmission, you will see people falling over each other to invest. You see investors in generation. And at the moment, I think we have something between 12 and 22,000 megawatts. Much of it is stranded capacity or standard generation because you do not have sufficient transmission capacity, and the distribution companies can't take all that volume because of infrastructure. So in 10 years, with everything going on, I think that power supply would have improved substantially, particularly in many states that are commercially viable. Those states where you see a lot of trade and commerce, states like Lagos, Rivers, maybe even Oyo, the Federal Capital Territory, power would have improved substantially. I think it will be twice as good as what it is now. I see that a lot is happening from the regulatory point of view. Distribution companies can now sub-franchise. There are incentives for metering. A lot is happening at the same time, and there's a lot of speak. And we're beginning to see more and more round pegs in round holes, things in terms of personnel and officers, public officers. So I think in 10 years, we won't be having this sort of conversation. It would now be that in those other states, a pocket of states that do not have sufficient power supply, what more can be done? Now, sufficient in the sense that you probably have an average of 12 hours in those states. But most states, Lagos and those other states, half of Nigerian states at least, should be closer to 20-24 hours. And I'm seeing a situation where it will be a combination of centralized, decentralized, and in other cases, you would also have hybrid. Situations where you have distributed generation. So a lot of guys are looking at mini grids. I'm currently advising on 2-3 mini grids at the moment, and some of those guys, investors who are developing those mini grids, are looking at up to 20. So you'd have power close to the load center, then you'll be able to free up space around transmission. And there are a number of transmission projects going on, together with what Siemens is doing. And I understand Nigeria has made its own counterpart payment with respect to what Siemens seeks to achieve in terms of helping upgrade infrastructure. So the distribution companies too, with the new service reflective tariffs, the idea is to ensure that, and people are already enjoying it, certain parts of Lagos, some parts of Ibadan, I understand some parts in the east too, where in some areas you've got electricity of 20 hours, 20 or for up to 20, 24 hours on many days. So this would just this would expand as particularly if the distribution companies can properly utilize new regulations, new regulations and policies around sub-franchising, where they can get locals in those areas to be responsible for collection, locals in those areas to be responsible for additional investment and collection in those areas. So I think with everything happening, if we all cooperate, and it does look like there's a lot of cooperation going on, I think electricity will be twice as good as what we have now, at least twice as good. And for many states, it will probably be near perfect. We'll be having 20 hours in many areas, in many states in 10 years. I'm sure, I believe that's what we will see in 10 years.
Okay, good to hear. Good to hear the very positive statement about 10-year future. So I'll just pivot into my next question from something you said. You mentioned the Siemens deal. Let's talk about it. It has been touted as the messiah to our power supply problems. Is that the case? What are your thoughts about the deal and the likelihood of its success?
Okay, I don't think it's the messiah. I think it's part of solving the problem. And I think it's a hydra-headed problem. From transmission to, I wouldn't say so much of generation, it will be more of gas for generation. So the problem around gas, and because gas itself is not the problem. Caleb, we're a gas province. We have more gas, way more gas than we do crude oil. So the problem is not gas. The problem there would then be commercial arrangements. So our problems are commercial arrangements, technical, you can put them in buckets. Technical, commercial largely, and then you can speak around market indiscipline, stroke collection. Now, so with the Siemens deal, the idea is to upgrade infrastructure, particularly from the distribution point of view. And what you then need, and in many cases, I understand that you'll be doing contractor financing. You'll be dealing directly with the contractors and all of that to reduce the chances of corruption and people not doing what they ought to do. So I think it's only a part of solving problems related to the jigsaw itself. The entire, it's a system. If you have a systemic problem, you wouldn't tackle it from one point. You tackle it throughout the entire value chain or throughout the entire system. So I think it's not a bad deal. And to the extent that government has made this counterpart payment, if not all of that, the counterpart funding, if the distribution companies can't cooperate, and I do hope discos don't see me as an enemy, because I always seem to think they're a major area where we need
I'm losing your voice a bit. Your voice is becoming a bit low.
Okay, so I said the distribution companies, provided the distribution companies can provide sufficient support and they can work hand in hand, I think there's a political will on the part of government, and I think Siemens is indeed very serious. So it's not the messiah, but it's part of the solution to a hydra-headed problem in the country, particularly with respect to electric power. Those are my thoughts. And I think, progress is being made. That's as much I can say.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. So my next question is about tariffs. A short while ago, the country witnessed a hike, about double the previous rate, in favor of service reflective tariffs. Are service reflective tariffs a roadmap to solving our electricity problems?
Yes and no. Service reflectivity, to a large extent, the way it's been structured is interesting. You've now got different bands of customers. They've jettisoned the idea of having R1, R2s, and all of that. You've pretty much still got the lifeline tariffs, R1. Guys who pay 4 naira per kilowatt hour, doesn't exceed, particularly where they don't do more than 50 kilowatt hours a month. But I doubt that there are people in Lagos who do less than 50 kilowatt hours a month. However, but that it is what it is. So service reflectivity, first, we need to understand what that is. It means that your tariffs would be directly proportional, if you want to be mathematical, to the service quality you receive. And service quality would primarily be number of hours of electricity. So if there are issues with along the distribution network, are they able to quickly solve that? Because that would translate into the number of hours you get a month. Now, so they are, depending on the disco, there are 4 or 5 bands. For those who get no less than 20 hours, those are the guys who've got almost double the tariffs in some cases. For example, within Eco's network and within Ikeja, you'd see that those have almost doubled. There's the next set, I think it's around 16, then you've got guys who do not less than 16. So it then means that for those who get less than 12, I think that their own tariffs haven't gone up. So the incentive, so it's a carrot and stick. The incentive is improve service quality and you can charge more. You can charge what is cost reflective. Do not improve it, do not be efficient, and then you do not make money. Now, the thing about that is that it can then push people or the distribution companies to only concentrate in areas where you've got people like Caleb, areas where you've got the rich, areas where you've got people who can pay and who understand why you should pay for electricity. You know, for a long time, and historically, it's not only in Nigeria, electricity is seen as a social good. It's seen as a commodity, social commodity. Everyone should have electricity. Government should provide that free for us. We have oil and gas. We don't benefit from that, then electricity. So for a long time, when it was still government owned, no one cared about infrastructure. It's tragedy of the commons. The concept of tragedy of the commons. When you have a lot of people, when you think everyone else should be the one responsible for taking care of a sector of infrastructure, no one ends up taking care of it. That's what the tragedy of the commons is. So for a long time, I think the last time before Governor Fashola, former Governor Fashola became Minister for Power, the very transmission upgrade had been done since 1987. The last transmission upgrade that was done, serious transmission upgrade that was done, was on 1987. So between 1987 and 2015, thereabout, that's quite a while. You understand? So no infrastructure. So I always say that you don't expect that things will suddenly improve. So service reflectivity is good, but it's not a silver bullet. It wouldn't solve all the problems. You still require things around ensuring there's metering, determining how you deal with recalcitrant consumers, those who still have the mindset that electricity should be free, and stuff around electricity theft. So if you don't deal with metering, deal with electricity theft, determine how you will do your collection. Use technology. If you use a lot of technology, you find out that more and more people, and I think the distribution company should leverage on the sub-franchising, because if you can leverage on it, you just get people in those areas who are sons of the soil, guys who've been there, who understand the system, and who can force people to pay. It's just like if you look at the informal sector, there are a lot of organizations, even if you look amongst guys that are regarded as touts, motor park touts and all of those, they've got a system that works. They know how to force each person to get things done. So in those areas, I wouldn't want to mention specific areas where collection is difficult, I'm sure if they use sub-franchising, or I believe strongly that if they use sub-franchising, then it would improve. As long as we don't solve the metering conundrum and we don't solve such other related matters like collection, we won't get to where we want to be headed. That's it. So yes, it would solve the problem. It's a part of, so like I said, because it's a systemic problem, the idea of service reflectivity is a part of the solution. It's not the solution.
Okay, that works. So my next question is around how we can really move forward in terms of policy for the electricity sector. For too long, we've talked about the problems, and I mean, I know them by rote right now, but the problems remain. So first, do you think we can have a fully powered Nigeria? That's my first question. And then closely following that, if we can, what top 3 policy moves would you advise the government to take for us to get there, if you were to advise the government?
Okay, I think we can, and I believe we will. I'm positive. I'm very positive. I'm an optimist. So I believe we will. And I've seen progress from administration to administration, at least in the last 3 administrations, to be honest. I've seen progress. I'm apolitical. I mean, I don't belong to any political party. So I think everyone, and I think particularly President Goodluck Jonathan did a fantastic job. I do know in some areas the political will wasn't strong enough, but in terms of concepts, in terms of policies, in terms of ideas, in terms of the privatization itself. I think it was excellent. I think I'll give him an A, if not an A plus. Many people even speak of corruption around that. I was very involved, at least 10 of those transactions. I advised on 10 of those transactions in my previous employment, and I do know very well that you could barely see corruption. It was mostly straightforward. That said, I think we can succeed, but what I will say, to be honest, is less is more. That's the first policy for me. In terms of regulations, in terms of intervention, I think government should hands off mostly. Because if government does hands off, then more private sector people, apart from doing what is government's role, critical infrastructure, just the way I believe government should be responsible for transmission, gas transmission pipelines. I think that government should be responsible for improving and substantially upgrading our transmission infrastructure. Other than that, I think government should hands off. I think that there should be fewer regulations. I think the sector is becoming almost over-regulated, where almost everything you want to do, there's some regulations, there's some hurdle you need to cross. I think government should regulate less. There should be, for example, if you look at the sub-franchising set of guidelines, I think it's 6 pages. It's short. I think that should be the approach. Let people do business. And then when they begin to do the business, then you have a sense of how you want to protect the investor and protect the consumers, and not the other way around. So I think, 1, less regulations. That's one policy I would say. 2, there should be the policy where government officials, ministries, departments, and agencies of the federal government pay for electricity. The discourse claimed that they are owed over $1 trillion. That's a second policy, and that's a policy movement. So less is more. To ensure that the ministries, departments, and agencies pay for electricity. And thirdly, I think that in terms of policy, there should be more political support to NERC to enforce. Political support in the sense that there's no political interference. Enforce rules and regulation. For me, that's a policy. And I'll say that together with driving a energy federalism policy, an energy federalism policy. What do I mean by energy federalism? I think that not everyone should be on the grid. For areas in the north, for example, promote more of mini grids. Yes, we'll get into issues around pricing. Promote more of mini grids. Promote more of off-grid. Promote more of solar systems. You could even have solar, like those 14 solar projects. They've not come on stream because there have been commercial challenges mostly around them because of the issues around Azura, partly. So let's practice energy federalism, such that if it's coal, use coal. There's some people say, I mean, coal can never be clean, but I've also done some research or heard quite a bit and been involved in transactions around clean coal technology. I know you're an environmentalist. I don't know whether you'd agree. I'm pro-Trump when it comes to energy policy. For areas that use coal, that have enormous coal. For areas that have enormous gas. For solar, let's have a hybrid. Let's practice energy federalism, true energy federalism. So those are 3.5 policies I think government should look at. First, MDAs to pay, energy federalism, less is more in terms of regulation, support NERC in enforcement. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, we might not agree on the environmental parts, but thank you for your thoughts on policy. And I think they are very fine suggestions. So you mentioned Azura, and it leads me to one of the questions that was asked by the audience, because we threw this open for people to ask questions. And somebody was asking, is there a possibility of the federal government entering into more Azura-type PPAs? You're already saying no. Okay.
Everyone says there's not going to be a second Azura. I said everywhere anyone asks me, there will never be a second Azura. Now, the concept even being considered by the country is the concept
so maybe I should finish the person's question just before you go ahead. The person then said, if not, how does the federal government attract more investment into the power sector?
Okay, regulate less. Make the incentives real incentives. And I'll give you an example. For example, there's what is known as the import duty exemption certificate. It's very, very difficult to get that certificate. Now, you say there's import exemption for classes of items brought into the country to build power plants, to do certain things. But to get that certificate is it's like passing through the eye of the needle, the biblical eye of the needle. So when government does issue policies, there should be a framework to enforce, and it should be easy. Countries similar to hydrocarbons, countries with the easiest regulatory regulations and policies have the most investment. So I think there won't be a second Azura. Government is actually looking at the concept of take and pay, distinct from the concept of take or pay. Take or pay means you pay whether or not you take. So you take, it's better you take and pay for it. But if you do not take, you still pay. Now, the concept of take and pay means that you would have, and there's this concept of, I'm trying to remember the exact term, but it's about scheduling power according to pricing. So the cheapest power gets dispatched, and the more expensive one gets dispatched as you need more power. That's one concept government is really considering. The second concept is the concept of take and pay, not take or pay. So that if you have a power plant, if you do not take your power, we do not pay for it. We do not even make capacity payments. We can make infrastructure projects a bit less bankable, because usually the base financial model for infrastructure projects is the capacity payment or the take or pay payment, because that's what guarantees a minimum amount periodically, whether it's monthly, whether it's weekly, whether it's daily, whatever it is. So there wouldn't be a second Azura. I don't think there would be. Maybe individual states, individual local governments can consider an Azura type, but I don't think the federal government will. That said, I think to attract it, see, Nigeria by nature is an attractive market, similar to China. Why? Population, by nature. Now, the issue is there are too many orders, there are too many regulations that just make it unattractive at times. Now, we say lifeline tariffs. We say the poor can pay for electricity. It's not exactly true. You know why? The average Baba runs a generator, I pass my neighbor, runs a generator referred to as I pass my neighbor for several hours. And that's, in many cases, at least 3 to 4 times what the tariffs are. So if they can, it's just, I think we need to sensitize people a bit more. NERC needs to do much more than it currently does. And I do my own bit through my tweets and my writings and all of that, to sensitize people more so that they appreciate the fact that if tariffs double, it's still way cheaper, and environmental issues around running your own generator, everyone running their own generators. So that's an advantage. Tariffs need to be cost/service reflective, one, so that it will attract people. Secondly, government needs to answer more, in my view. So there's the embed. Embed isn't entering into new PPAs. That's my understanding, and they haven't. So at some point, I think embed, and the idea, I think, was for 5 years initially, until the discourse become credit-worthy, bankable, whatever it is. But it's been on and on. So I think government needs to answer more. Let people play their game, and then you have regulations to protect consumers. That's what I think. So our market is huge, and the gap between demand and supply is enormous, such that I'm sure there are people who really want to fill that gap. It's just the regulatory and other hurdles that's been a problem.
Okay, thank you for that. The take and pay model sounds very interesting, and I would have liked to engage more on it, but then we have very short time. Maybe some other conversation. So my final question today is just for the young people who will be listening to this. Young people want to get involved in energy policy, particularly in influencing and driving power solutions from the policy side. How can they do this effectively?
Oh, interesting. First point is, if you don't blow your trumpet, no one will. So if you do not express your ideas and promote your ideas, no one will hear them, and no one would know you have such ideas. One thing to do, similar to what you're doing, write more, engage in this sort of conversations. And if you have the opportunity, I mean, social media technology has made it easy, where you can project your ideas. So start from that. It's in the process of projecting your idea that a policy maker is going to see what you're writing, hear what you are saying, and then maybe invite you for a conversation, invite you to join a panel, and also participate in politics. There's someone I really value a lot. We don't necessarily have a relationship. is Mr. Akintunde Oyebode. He's doing quite a bit. He's a young man and he's a commissioner now. So write, be seen out there, and with time, if you do it right, and if you remain consistent, I put out a tweet a few days ago. I've been writing on policy, power policy, and all of that for the business day newspapers. I'm sorry, I'm not advertising. For the past 10 years, and it was 10 years in July, I have been consistent. If I've missed any, I'm sure I've not missed more than thrice. If I have over 10 years. So it's consistency, consistently write, consistently make your voice heard, and with time, and then participate in politics. Become a carrying member. You don't need to join the APC or the PDP. You can join smaller parties and in your own area. So because I believe that with time, there will be serious electoral reforms and people who actually ought to be in positions. And we're beginning to see that old public offices will begin to hold public policies. It's not necessarily the case now that many of those who are there ought to be there by merit, but I believe that with time, it will be the case. Start writing, get involved in even providing free advisory. With time, yeah, you will be able to do much more than you currently are. Those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Oni. It has been good talking to you about the Nigerian power sector. Thank you so much for joining us. And to everyone who has joined us today in watching this, till our next episode, please do stay safe. Thank you.